for the past 4 years, I think I always come back to Stanford. Jack McDonough, one of my professors back at GSB, asked me come back and talk about internet and startups, and sometimes about investment for the past 4 years. And this year is the first year I haven't made it to his class, so I decided to come back here to do the same thing. When I was preparing for this keynote, I realized that roughly about 11 years ago, I was back at GSB on the same podium with Jack Ma. So I was thinking, I was in the bubble days of the dot-com days, and I was thinking, hopefully this time we're not at peak of another internet bubble. But today I want to talk about the RenRen story and talk about how we innovate at what we call the bleeding edge of SoLoMo. And SoLoMo is coined by John Doerr and his partner Mary Meeker when she was still working at Morgan Stanley. I think she came out with an internet report every year, which a lot of people read. And ever since that, they invented this word it's been widely used by the startup guys in the industry. I mean social, local, and mobile. I want to talk about social first. So what is social? A lot of people here use Facebook, Twitter, and a lot of you probably use RenRen as well if you're back in China. And the social has really been around for a long time. I remember back in '99 when I started my first startup, ChinaRen. It was actually a first-generation social network with real names. Except back in those days, there were no photographs, and it's very difficult to take digital photos and upload. So we really call it nowadays, at that time, was the Facebook without face. And so social network has been around for a long time, at least since '99. And now they have transformed industry to a certain extent that it's almost becoming as big, which I would probably say potentially bigger than search. It's really one-dimensional ways of organizing the entire internet and the user behavior on the internet based on the personal relationships and a person as the organizing center, versus search is trying to organize the entire internet based on keywords. So these are the two very important transportation infrastructure for the entire internet, and everybody else simply ride on top of it. So social, as we will talk later, is really providing one additional way of transporting activities, users over the internet using the social graph. And that's a fundamental innovation. We believe that social probably is one of the most important product DNAs ever invented on the internet. And there will be continuous new innovations, but I think fundamental innovations like these probably will be very hard to come by. And I'll talk about social, the implications of that. But before I want to talk a little bit about RenRen. And ever since 1999, the social has swept China and spawned a lot of little companies and services in a lot of different vertical sectors. You will see that RenRen showed up on quite a few places here because we are in different segments of social. And give you a few stats for some of you who are interested in China internet. Is the user base now is close to 500 million users. And of those 500 million users, there are about 300 million users who have used a blog. And that's very large compared with US. And roughly about 200 million people have used the Twitter-like service called Weibo in Chinese. And there's about 220 million users who have used social network. And RenRen has about 130 million activated user base in China out of that 220. So I want to talk a little bit how we do social networking in China. And as some of you might know, that the China internet environment is very different from here in the US, in the sense that the user segments are mostly young, and a lot of them living in second-tier and third-tier cities. And they demand a lot of individual attention to personalization to the internet services they have. So this is the first thing we did. We allow users on a paying basis to customize their pages. We also give them different means to beautify the page, such as personalizing the pointer, the cursor, as well as picking different skins. And we even have a partnership with Disney to sell value-added service based on Disney characters. And another example is the RenRen desktop. Desktop is something you know that desktop applications in China is extremely important. The most valuable, in terms of market cap, internet company in China is called Tencent QQ. It's essentially a desktop software company with a QQ Instant Messenger as the flagship for the entire suites of internet services. And also, one of the largest revenue categories is internet games. Also is based on desktops, PCs. So we have developed RenRen Desktop, which is really a desktop software that's internet connected. That does two things. One is that it allows users to view their newsfeed in real time and allow them to reply to it in real time, also allowing them to chat. This product is widely used by our active users, particularly those users on college campus. And this is some user session. And many of you know that China has traditionally been an agriculture-based country for the past few thousand years. And so it's probably not surprising that the first farming game was launched on RenRen in China, even before Farmville was launched here. This game is called Happy Farming. It was so successful in 2008 and 2009 that it created a sensation in China. For some reason, they invented a game mechanic that's very, very unique. It's called stealing vegetables. That became very popular. I mean, in US, on Facebook, there's a poke, right? But in China, people are not used to poking each other. But they like stealing vegetables. So in 2009, this game was so hot that you have fairy tales of grandma getting up in the morning, 3 o'clock, harvesting their vegetables, and then stealing their neighbor's vegetables online. And so that's another Chinese characteristic of the internet, how it develops. And showing you another example in the field of social content. This is a vertical social Q&A that we launched not long ago. It's the world's first automobile social Q&A. It allows users to ask any questions related to the car, and we promise them to answer the question within 24 hours by a real expert that's verified. So this is our answer to social content. We think that because before social networking came to age, most of the web services, websites that's content-based, optimize themselves for search engine. But nowadays, increasingly, social networks drive increasing amount of traffic to these sites. So we're seeing that these web services need to fundamentally change the product DNA, so they both work with search engine as well as working with social networks. So this is one example of very well built product that cater to how social networks would like the content side to work. And a lot of people debated about open versus closed, integrated approach versus distributed approach. For example, back in the PC era, Microsoft succeeded by dominating the software layer and opening up the hardware layer to everybody else to participate. And they took the market away from the integrated approach of Apple. But in the post-PC era, the same approach of integrated services pioneered by Apple went over Microsoft. So we are experimenting different approaches of open and integrated, to serve the consumers the best. For example, in areas of social gaming, we're totally open. But this is one example that we offer a highly integrated, closed music service for the one simple reason. We want to work with third parties to provide music services to our users. But nobody could afford copyrighted content. Nobody could afford that. Because if you cannot guarantee a minimum amount of distribution, you're not going to spend a lot of money buying the copyrights. So we went ahead, we bought the entire available copyrights, and we start offer integrated social music to our user base. And I believe this is most likely what Facebook will end up doing. But we're doing that first. And this is one example of Renren Radio, where you can listen to radio with your friends and sharing your music taste. I'm going to give you another example of what we call social content. Not long ago, we launched RenRen Xiaozhan, which is really what we call light blog, which is very similar to Tumblr here. It allows a user to publish social content to a highly customized, very simple interface that can be subscribed by anybody on RenRen. So after we opened up the service, it instantly became #1 in China because we have so many users who have special interest, who want to share their expertise and interest with the entire user base of RenRen, in addition of maintaining a closed personal profile on RenRen. And finally, I want to talk a little bit on the RenRen part about how we monetize and why it's different from other social networks in the world. Last year, majority of our revenue came from gaming. And everybody know that, let's say on Facebook, most of the revenue came from advertising. Well, similar to that in the sense that a larger part of Facebook advertising actually comes from social gaming vendors that try to promote their services on Facebook. So we're similar in that. But what's different is that nowadays we're deriving more than half of revenue from brand advertisers. These are brand advertisers who want to bond with our user base and build a brand on RenRen. And so far, we have worked close to 1,000 advertisers in China. This includes some of the biggest multinationals and local brands. And I predict that even now, we are mostly in advertising. I predict that in 3 years later, more than half of revenue will be coming from e-commerce. Now, let me move to the second dimension of SoLoMo, which is local. For us, for many people, local means different things, but for us, it means two things. One, it means location. The other means local commerce, or you can generalize that as e-commerce. So last year, recognizing the mega trend of commerce, e-commerce becoming social, we launched a social group buying service called Nuomi, which in Chinese means sticky rice. And it became a runaway success that I will talk about later. And in addition to offering group buying, we also offer local coupons. Imagine using a RenRen phone product, and you'll be browsing these coupons and group deals based on a map. And you can take instant actions based on how close you are and how hungry you are. For example, at 12 o'clock, we're primarily showing ramen shops within 5-minute walking distance from where you are, as long as you are moving. And how we integrate the commerce with social network, of course, is by newsfeed. When a user buys a group buy purchase or clicked on a coupon and liked it, it will automatically send the newsfeed out. And when the friends see it, they will click on it and take action on it, and it become viral. And let me show you how this viral effect can create commercial miracles. This is the first deal ever on Nuomi when we launched it in June last year. It's a movie theater in suburban Beijing with multiple screens and built by the famed movie star Jackie Chan. It's called Jackie Chan Theater at Wukesong, Beijing. And because those theaters are so far away that even the owner tries to lure the users, the consumers, by promising a free Mercedes ride. They still couldn't fill the screens, the theaters, for like years. And then on that day, they decided to give it a try with us, even though we're brand new. We had no brand. But we only had one thing. We had newsfeed integration with RenRen. So within the first 12 hours launching the deal, starting from the midnight, by noon, we have sold 70,000 tickets on RenRen alone. So we're basically selling only to our user base in Beijing, because remember, that's only for one movie theater. And these white-collar workers were so happy with that deal, because that deal came very deep discount, typically sold for $20 plus for 2 tickets, but we were selling that at $6, $7 for 2 person, plus the ice cream and popcorn too. So these consumers are so happy, they go out to lunch and talk about it. And talking about the second propagation of viral, right? So their colleagues, once hearing upon that, decide to also participate. So after lunch, we sold another 230,000 for a total of 300,000 tickets for one movie theater in one day with no advertising. That's the power of commerce coupled with social network. And lastly, I want to talk about the mobile aspect of SoLoMo. And for us, mobile is really a fusion between social and local, right? Because mobile device is a computing device that both offers mobility as well as uniquely the locational information. But in order to do well on mobile and take full advantage of the locational information that it has to offer, that's another advantage of real name-based social network can offer, is that people feel much more comfortable sharing their location with their true friends. And that's one of the reasons RenRen is the #1 location-based service provider in China. And our usage has shoot off the chart ever since we launched it. And so far, our competitors still hasn't launched that service, probably intimidated by the advanced features that we offer. We're also the first social network in the world to allow our users to combine the UGCs they created on a mobile phone with the location. So instead of doing a very simple check-in service, we allow users to update their status at a certain location and share that. So that's like generating a sentence, not just with a key sentence, but also with some descriptions attached to it. We also allow users to upload a picture with a comment with a locational service, with the location information, and share it with their friends. And that's the power of real name-based social network, and also the power of the integrated nature of our services. If this location-based service is provided by a third party, then it's very difficult to integrate that kind of service. For instance, if you click and use our mobile service, and you click the the location-based buttons, and you get all the nearby deals going on, and where your friends are nearby, so on and so forth. So I want to show how powerful it can be with combining social, local, and mobile. This is a real case. We offered a location-based service integrated campaign for MasterCom, which is a leading instant noodle and drink brand in China. In one of the city, second-tier city called Hefei. It's a college town. And when users log in onto their mobile phone in that city, or even entire China, they will be able to participate in these events. If you're outside the city, you can participate online on the PC, or if you're there, you can go to the store and check in. And this campaign brought in 6,000 new consumers into the store to try out that drinks in one city. And that's probably the first time in the world, experiment, at least in China, an experiment like this happens. Mobile commerce really generates brand new marketing opportunities for businesses and commerces. And this shows how viral it can be. And finally, some concluding remark. The reason I use bleeding, I wanted to use cutting edge, right? But some of you might know the internet industry is so competitive in China. I decided to use bleeding. So what is it about? About SoLoMo. First of all, we think that mobile will change everything. It's a new computing platform with the importance that's even probably higher importance than the invention of PC. Remember, every time when there's a computing platform shift, fortunes change hands. Fortunes were destroyed and created. Old company, big company got destroyed, and new company erupted. We think there's going to be huge creation and destruction of wealth in the TMT sector in the next 5 years. And we've probably already seen some of those, right? We have seen, we have heard the news of many companies decide to sell themselves or spin off their PC divisions or selling themselves entirely to Google. Remember, these are companies just 5 years ago was almost looking invincible. So we think that the entire TMT space will be transformed because the newer generation of leaders such as Apple, Google, Facebook, they're so innovative and they're taking such a dramatic business approach that I think that the new round of battle will be very, very fierce. But for consumers, it's a great show because we benefit. We all benefit from the intense competition of these highly innovative, very humongous companies. And all major internet services will be transformed. I have shown some of the services, for such example, Chen.com, AskCars.com, right, which is entirely social, right? It's not very search engine friendly. It doesn't allow search engine to search. We decide to just let it fully integrate with RenRen and only take advantage of social network. Of the 4 categories of services online, commerce, entertainment, that means gaming and video, content, and communication. Search historically only affected 2, which is content. Search fundamentally transformed content business and became a kingpin in content. It also helped facilitate the rise of e-commerce because search helped e-commerce to derive demands and generate leads. But if you look at social, social is one category, is such a fundamental infrastructure that it transforms almost all the categories of the 4, right? You look at social by itself is communication. It transformed communication. It displaced email. It's displacing email, instant messenger, and these first-generation communication services and becoming bigger. And it's transforming the content distribution. Because I use RenRen almost every day, I found myself no longer using news portals. Because I got a lot of news on RenRen already. My friends share those news. If it matters to them, it matters to me. And I found myself using less of search as well, particularly on mobile phone. I seldom search on mobile. I don't feel the need. Because just by accessing RenRen, I get most of the content I feel like I need it. And gaming is another area that's transformed, right? We saw the rise of Zynga and Playfish and these companies. They started from zero to multi-billion-dollar value in a matter of 1 or 2 years. The same amount of, it's the same amount of value that took EA and Vivendi decades of time to build. So with the rise of social and the cutting-edge competition of these highly innovative companies, we think that our life will be fundamentally changed. The whole world will be closer, connected. The commerce, entertainment, content, communication will be permanently shaped, transformed into better and better services that's more accessible, providing more value to consumers. And Renren being a key player in the SoLoMo and the social revolution in China. We feel privileged. In the meantime, we feel we're standing at the bleeding edge because competition and because of innovation. But we're very confident that with the continuous innovation and the tireless effort, one day we're going to build a services that will serve every Chinese in any way they can imagine. And thank you. You can find me on Renren by searching my name, Joe. And yeah, I would like to answer any question that you might have.
The microphones here in the aisle, please, and identify yourself. There's a microphone there.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody. I was working in a search engine company in China, and I was asking to you a question about how do you think about the future competition between the search engine and the social networking? Because in the previous age, there's age of search, such Google and Baidu in China, and now the social come up, and there is a fierce competition between Facebook and Google in the US. And how do you think of Baidu and Renren in China competition? Thank you.
That's a very good question. I think I alluded to some of that in my speech, but I think that's a very good question. I think the old school thinking about how social networks compete with search was very traditional. They say, oh, they worry about Facebook or Renren creating a social search. Or the way to compete with them for search engine is to create social search on a search platform. But that was deadly wrong. Because the way that social network compete with search is not through search. It's through newsfeed. Newsfeed is the main way, is the main mechanism for social network to transport content and information. And the search, the search action is the main way for search to work. Right? So therefore, the way they compete is really social network created an alternative way for people to obtain information that's relevant for them. It indirectly reduces the number of queries on search because people already sort of found out what they want to know. But more importantly, they indirectly reduce the consumption of other forms of media, including news portals. That's why Yahoo nowadays is entering a difficult time because their main portal business is being hurt. And the email business, which used to be the anchoring asset for Yahoo, is now impacted by Facebook too. So that's what I think about it. I always think that if one day Facebook exceeded Google or Renren exceeded Baidu, it's not because we came out with a way to search. It's only because that our user base has grown so big and they consume a bigger percentage of their daily content, including what we call absolute content, the content that's not generated by their friends, but content generated not by their friends, but by some publishers once you reach that critical mass, the usage of search will drop. And that's really how the competition plays out. Next question. Yeah.
Joe, just from your presentation, I saw a lot of like applications actually are owned or partially owned by RenRen. That's quite different in US because we see like Twitter and Facebook are quite open and purely open platform. So they open the interface to integrate the third-party applications more than the platform in China. So why you think, I mean, China social network platform choose a different approach in terms of this like strategy for third-party applications? Thank you.
Very good question. I think there's no right or wrong. I think the same example plays out here in US. I use the example of Microsoft versus Apple. Apple took an integrated close approach, but managed to offer unparalleled user experience by integrating, by optimizing across different stacks, and by making the technical compromises and to deliver integrated high performance to consumers. And in all case, our philosophy is always open. We only do those verticals such as music that no third parties can do well. And another example would be location-based service. No third parties can do really well unless you're putting a lot of money. And of course, most of the third-party companies doesn't have a lot of financial resource. So unless they see something, they can guarantee the success. They're not going to throw in the financial resources, the engineering resources to do it. So for us, we decided to focus on a very few verticals where it's very difficult and impossible for third parties to do, but we opened up the rest of the platform for everybody to participate, such as gaming, such as all the vertical applications, including the file sharing, including a whole bunch of other services. So we think that there's no right or wrong with open or close. What's absolute right or wrong is all about consumers. We'll do whatever consumer demands, and we'll do our best to deliver the best services available for them, being closed or open. Yes.
Hey, Joe. So this is Xin. I'm also a Stanford alumni and a very loyal user of RenRen since 2005. So I want to ask more about the user expanding strategy outside of the college student. Because from my own experience, like both on RenRen and Facebook, I just noticed these days, when I log in RenRen, I'm still talking to my college alumni, and it's really just about photo sharing, daily news, and even games sometimes. And Facebook is just expanding far more beyond that. And I was very successful in terms of persuading my boss, also lots of senior people to join Facebook. But it's very hard to persuade even like my mom to use RenRen, because she was like, you can just send me photos through QQ. So I know we have just changed the name from Xiaonei to RenRen, and just want to learn more about the strategy around that. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think in China, right, in your particular case, I guess that's probably because you have moved to States and you developed most of your white-collar relationship here in States, where you kept your college buddies in China. So that's, your case is probably a little bit unique. But in China, or about half of user base is still college kids. And then maybe 10% high school, and the rest of them are white-collar. We are very, our penetration rate in white-collar market is still very small. So that's where we see most of our growth going to come from. And the way we do that, the way we increase our penetration white-collar, I think that stem from one mission, which is really offering the communication service really well. Because we look at our core offerings, right? The core for RenRen is communication. Photo sharing is communication. Sharing an article is communication. And talking to each other is communication. And sending a photo is communication. So anything that's related to communication, we want to do it really, really well. And so far, because we're such a young company, so compared with other companies that's been around for like 10, 15 years, our number of engineers are like 10% of theirs. So I think that we're going to continue to invest in engineering forces and hiring the best talents and leveraging on those talents to build the best next generation communication services, because we think communication is key. We think that for white collar in China, that it's a little bit different from here in the US, where typically a white collar worker, young graduate, they go to a big city, the salary is not that high, and their status, their sense of insecurity is much bigger than typical their counterparts in the US. So we need to help them do that too, which means help them to deal with job changes and as well as helping them finding the best deal to get the biggest bang for the buck, because their salary cannot cope with the inflation in big cities. So we need to find a value for them and also increase the value of their communication time spent on RenRen. Basically, helping them to do well in offline life, but also giving them more value for every hour of time spent on RenRen. So that's our general strategy. Next one. Yeah, this gentleman.
I'm TK Chu, a visitor. I have two questions. The first one, it's referring to Professor Duncan said, excuse me, some of the internet services is struggling in China, and I think that's probably more true for some of the American companies who are trying to establish a foothold in there. They are struggling more than the Chinese. So the question is, what is this really the root problem of the struggling, especially for American companies? And my second question is in some way related to this. That's also Professor Duncan referred to. Yesterday, there was a big sell-off of all the Chinese internet service. The triggering was, at least if you read the paper, says the Justice Department is going to open investigation of these Chinese internet services. Now, why the Chinese internet services are so vulnerable to this factual or rumored things? Are the two questions related? Why Americans find so hard to survive, and in some way that the American now view the Chinese company with some kind of suspicion?
Interesting question. I think that for the first question, how international companies do in China, I think that my observation is that traditional multinational companies do extremely well in China. These companies include, KFC. KFC is one of the biggest chain, restaurants in China. They do so well, even though fried chicken is not a traditional part of Chinese diet. Now they're all changed. And I remember Caterpillar owns a huge building in Beijing, right next to Microsoft. So these traditional multinational companies are doing extremely well in China relative to the technology companies. Well, I think the answer for that is twofold. One of them is probably related to your second question. The first reason probably has something to do with the fact that I mentioned earlier, which is in our industry, we are going through a platform change. We're going through the post-PC era into mobile computing era. And during this transition, nobody has an easy life, including Apple, even though they are leading, right? They cannot afford to slow down a little bit. So I think that the reason that technology companies tend not to do well as their traditional counterparts is probably has something to do with the fundamental changes. They have to deal with globalization, but a more important issue is really how do they deal with technology transformation. And a second reason has something to do with the regulatory view that the internet is more like related to media versus the technology, right? So in the regulator's view, we are more like a media company. So we should be regulated as a media company, and media company mostly state-controlled in China. So that's why when SINA went public more than 10 years ago, they invented a legal structure called VIE, variable interest entities, to basically to have a legal framework allowing them to be listed in U.S. And now, more than 10 years later, this came to question again. I think you guys should ask Jack Ma about that if he's here. I heard he's coming here. So I'm not an expert on that, but I guess Jack is single-handedly calling the attention to this issue. So recently, the market has been very brutal for Chinese internet companies. Some of them went down 18% in one day. But we're not worried. We announced a stock buyback yesterday, and we're here for the long term. We think any ambiguities will be cleared out sooner or later. And the most important thing is to focus on innovation and think about how to position yourself and keep on innovating and grow the company. So as long as you do that and taking care of the fundamentals, these these market turmoils tend to work themselves out, because it's really difficult to make a wave that shouldn't be there for the long term. I mean, at the end of the day, I always say the market is a voting machine in the short term, but it's a waiting machine in the long term. So I think my time is up, and thank you very much to be here. My pleasure to be here too. Thank you.